Toronto Maple Leaf defenseman Morgan Rielly's 5-game suspension has been affirmed by Commissioner Gary Bettman following an in-person appeal hearing. Rielly's already served 4 of the 5 games for his cross-check on Sens forward Ridley Gregg in the final moments of Ottawa's 5-3 win back February 10th. Rielly will miss Wednesday's game against the Yotes before being eligible to return to the lineup Thursday against the Las Vegas Golden Knights. The Leafs, surprisingly, 4-0 in Rielly's absence, as we welcome our TSN hockey insider, Pierre LeBrun, to the show. Pierre, were you at all surprised that Gary Bettman stuck with George Parros, his guy, on this 5-game suspension?
Yeah, Jay, I wasn't surprised at all. And in fact, I was kind of surprised that there were a lot of people expecting that Gary Bettman would reduce his suspension. He almost never does that. So, and I understand the arguments and the other cross-checks. I'd only got a game. I honestly did not think that he would reduce it for a couple of reasons, some of which he mentioned in his own ruling, Jay. But the NHL hates, and Gary Bettman in particular, they hate these kinds of acts that happen at the buzzer. In other words, the game is over and I'm going to get my pound of flesh. The league hates that, and that's what this was. And in fact, in Gary Bettman's ruling, one of the things he pointed out is that because Morgan Rielly had no prior history of these types of acts, that's why he only got 5. Never mind less than 5.
Right.
If this was anyone else with the same play, this could have been 6 to 8 to 10 games, is essentially what the commissioner is saying if you read between the lines. So, listen, I think we can all turn the page, but it's pretty clear that honestly, I don't think this was an appeal that made a whole lot of sense in my mind. But you get why the NHLPA and the player want to do it. They've had a few appeals this season, but none of them have led to anything.
You're already a busy man, but you're about to be even busier as we get to the trade deadline. We have pending UFA Noah Hanifin in our top 3 on our trade bait list. One of several Calgary Flames who could be dealt ahead of the deadline. What's the latest with Hanifin, Pierre?
So Noah Hanifin is a story worth a book in itself this year for all the ebbs and flows that story has had. And you know, for those listening, maybe just catching up, I mean, the Flames nearly signed him to an 8-year extension back in October, and we reported on it. But then he kind of got cold feet, is what we were told, and backed away from an extension at the time, as we reported, that was worth 8 years at $7.5 million a year. And so when that happened, it kind of felt like, okay, so Noah Hanifin's getting traded then. But then as the season went on, the Flames and Hanifin's camp, led by agent Pat Brisson, they started talking again about an extension. And the fact is, Jay, they are still talking. The Flames, as we speak, are still hoping to find a way to sign him, except that there's a realization from the Flames front office that March 8th is coming.
Yeah.
And there is zero chance that they will let Noah Hanifin walk into free agency July 1st without getting anything in return for him before this trade deadline on March 8th, which goes back to the initial comments that Craig Conroy made when he was named GM, right? That after the Johnny Gaudreau thing, walking away for free, that the Flames were not going to let that happen with their notable pending UFAs. So, listen, I don't think the Flames have given up on trying to sign him, Jay, but it just feels to me, in talking to a lot of people around the league over the last couple of days, that he's likely getting dealt. And that's what, you know, the Flames are on the phone talking to teams, trying to see what they'd be willing to offer up in a trade.
Speaking of trades, the Canucks and Jets both made major deals a couple of weeks ago. We kind of thought maybe, Pierre, all right, now the floodgates will open, but that hasn't happened despite the fact that our buddy Chris Johnston keeps adding more guys to the trade bait board. So why has this trade market been so slow to develop after those 2 big trades?
Because James Duthie, I'm told, phoned every GM in the league and said, do not make another trade or else. No, that's not true. Although he is the happiest man alive right now that there hasn't been a trade since. Couple of reasons that, you know, have been bandied about. There's no one reason, but, you know, a couple of teams have talked to me about the fact that on the D market, you know, there's so much interest, for example, in Chris Tanev, that while there's some of the same teams also have interest, for example, in a Sean Walker, you know, everyone has their list, but it feels like they want to see what happens with Tanev and now Hanifin, frankly. So that's kind of like you're waiting for that domino effect on the D market.
Yep.
And of course, the other thing is that, when it comes to some of the players available, there have been offers made. Like, for example, I think the Anaheim Ducks have had at least one offer on Adam Henrique up front, but want to see if they can get a better one between now and March 8th. Montreal said yes to Winnipeg's offer for Sean Monahan because Kent Hughes, the GM, felt it was never going to get better waiting 6 weeks than a first-round pick, which is what they got for Sean Monahan. But the other players in play right now, teams are getting offers, Jay. It's not like nothing's happening, but clearly not enough. I mean, if the Philadelphia Flyers have been offered a first-round pick by now for Sean Walker, which they hope to get, by the way, they probably would have dealt him. But clearly that hasn't happened quite yet. It may, but it hasn't happened quite yet. So that's what is, from what I can understand, the sellers are still waiting for someone to step up and meet their price, and there's still time for that.
And then there's the Pittsburgh Penguins, Pierre, maybe the most fascinating team heading into the deadline. Obviously, they're not where they hoped they'd be in the standings. They're likely seller. Who are some of the pieces you think they might be willing to move on from?
Well, obviously, Jay Gensel's the big name. We've talked about him all year. He's a pending UFA, as you know. But I mentioned a different name on Insider Trading on Tuesday, and that's Rielly Smith, who won a Stanley Cup with Vegas last year. He's not your prototypical player that's dealt at the deadline because he's not a rental. He's not a pending UFA. He's got another year on his deal at $5 million. But I know that some teams have him on their list because of that Cup-winning experience and want to see where the Penguins are here closer to March 8th and see if they're willing to move him. What I can tell you is that the Penguins are pretty much listening on all of their players other than their core guys. That because of where they are in the standings, while Kyle Dubas has not given up on the playoff race, he still believes his team can make a run. He has no choice because, we're 2.5 weeks out, that he is listening on a lot of his players, just not his core guys. So that is happening right now.
A new trade bait list comes out Wednesday, and last week's trade bait list had 4 Anaheim Ducks on it. Pierre, every time I'm on Twitter, Trevor Zegras is trending. Like, he's trending daily on Twitter. It's actually hilarious. The Montreal Canadiens fan base is willing him into existence into Quebec, it seems. He's at 50 now. But is Trevor Zegras, Pierre, a real candidate to be traded?
So, having made a few calls on this over the past week, Jay, here's what I would tell you, and I want to make sure I don't get radioed here, my friend, is that the Ducks have listened on Trevor Zegras. My understanding is they haven't phoned a single team and brought up his name. This is other teams, because it's been out there, picking up the phone and saying, what's going on here? And the Ducks haven't hung up. They haven't said, how dare you? But that's a big difference between making it a priority to move him. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I will tell you that of the 4 or 5 teams that I'm told that have phoned the Ducks, that the Montreal Canadiens are one of them. So, I mean, that is true. And why wouldn't they? But having said that, I don't get the sense right now that that the Ducks are committed to moving him, that they really want to move him. Let's see what happens this summer. I think this is more that, somehow his name came up and teams started calling. And I think the Ducks, given where they are in their rebuild, are like, well, let's see if someone goes crazy. Why not?
Now, the Leafs play in Arizona Wednesday, as we mentioned earlier. And I know you heard this clip, but in case anyone didn't, here's what Arizona native Matthew Nyes had to say ahead of the game.
How many friends and family are you anticipating for that one?
About 50 or 60, which is probably a section at that arena.
It's funny because it's true. It is a section. Pierre, what is the latest on the Arizona Coyotes arena situation?
Oh, my goodness, Jay. You know that you could have asked me that 15 years ago, and it was still an accurate question on your part? Oh, the never-ending saga.
Oh,
it's unbelievable. Listen, the league, when we ask the league about it, and I think we asked Gary Bettman about it at All-Star at his news conference, he feels that, the Coyotes ownership are doing all they can to secure a piece of land and that there are some positive steps being undertaken. But I don't think what you're hearing is anything definitive either way.
Right.
So this still has to play out. Listen, the league has to put next year's schedule together, I think by March 1st. So, there is certainly some pressure in this situation. The other thing I would tell you is that if for whatever reason the NHL felt compelled to have to relocate the Coyotes, that the last time we had relocation in this league was Atlanta to Winnipeg, and that didn't happen until late May of 2011. So the key thing, what I'm saying is late May is the thing to remember here, if you believe in history repeating itself in terms of a timeline. So I'm not exactly sure where this is headed. I think the league, again, the last time we talked, felt that the Coyotes were taking the right steps, but there has to be concrete evidence here soon of what that looks like in terms of building somewhere in the Phoenix area. So TBD, you get to ask me again at some point.
Oh, man.
Jay,
it seems like, if you're saying late May, it seems like I got a few more months of questions about this for you. But Pierre, one thing I did want to follow up with, are you surprised the NHL hasn't come out and made some sort of statement since the All-Star game one way or another about this, or are you not surprised about that?
I think part of it is that, they said what they said at All-Star, and it just felt like the next statement to be had is from the Coyotes.
Yeah.
Here's where we're at. And I think that's what people are waiting for. I do want to add this, because I think this might surprise some of our viewers, maybe not. But I will tell you that if for whatever reason the Coyotes ever do relocate, let's say to Salt Lake City or somewhere else, Arizona would go right back to the top. They'd be number one on the NHL's expansion list.
Absolutely.
If the Coyotes don't get salvaged under this current ownership, I'm not saying they won't, by the way. Maybe Rielly will figure this out. But if they don't, that's not a sign that the league has given up on that market. It's a sign they've given up on that ownership group. And so if that team ever moves, I'm telling you right now, I know this for a fact, the league would do all it can over the next few years after that to put a team right back in that market. Absolutely.
Gary Bettman has made that very clear. I have to agree with you, even if I disagree with that process. Okay, let's move on from the Yotes. All-Star game in Long Island right before the Olympics in 2026. Why?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking that question because I do think it caught some people off guard, because we've been used to the fact that once there's NHL participation at the Olympics that there's no All-Star, which of course, as you may know, I'm not a big fan of All-Star. But it's not uncharted territory. In fact, in 2002, I remember covering the All-Star game in LA and then jumping on a plane to Salt Lake City for the O2 Olympics. So the NHL has done this before. And what they want to do in this particular case is they want to do a huge send-off in New York with all the NHL All-Stars that are headed to the Olympics and give that event a real Olympic feel. And literally, the Olympians, the NHL Olympians, will be getting on charters right from New York All-Star to Italy. And so there's sort of a sense of the timing of it all and doing something glitzy as a send-off. So you get it from that perspective. It just means that it slightly extends the break from All-Star to Olympics. But I guess it means I'll have to cover another All-Star game, Jay. So that is the downside in all of this.
Maybe TSN could send you and I to the Olympics, though, because I could hang with you in Milan, no problem.
I certainly hope to be there. I've had the privilege to cover a few NHL Olympics, and if you were there, it would seem that much more exciting. It would be real if you were there, buddy.
So here it is. TSN, me and Pierre, we're already calling dibs. Sorry, Duthie. It's great having you on the show, Pierre. You're the best. And I look forward to seeing you on Trade Center. It's going to be a busy day for you, so rest up, okay?
Right on, right on.
Yes, Pierre will be very busy. CJ will be there, Dregs. Yes, Duthie will be hosting with all his shenanigans, his llamas, all that stuff. It's presented by Harvey's. How about this? Trade Center, March 8th, right here on TSN.